It is comically scary how many people fall for the shams put right below their feet. Many of you have probably heard about the hubbub that happened in the Tennessee state capitol, where three elected representatives were put up for expulsion. Two were actually successfully expelled. Justin Jones and Jones and Pearson, who I'll discuss in a second, both Democrats, and a woman, Gloria Johnson, who stood by with them as they broke the rules of House decorum. She was also put up for a vote to be expelled, but she survived by one vote. And of course, that's being called racism because she's white and Pearson and his other friend, Jones, are both black. We'll talk about that in a second as well. But both of these gentlemen, overnight, have essentially become national figures. In fact, several individuals, such as Barack Obama, spoke out against what happened to them, against the vote to expel them, by evoking the moral language of free speech. Now, it's laughable that Barack Obama or anyone that I'm about to read from has any idea about moral foundations or proper behavior, because their presidencies and their 10 years in politics have been characterized by repeatedly violating those foundations. Barack Obama several times violated those foundations, bombing kids in Afghanistan, deposing a sovereign leader in Libya, Gaddafi, no matter how evil he was, deposed him, destroyed his country, sent it into civil war for several years. I mean, there's just many things he did. But that's besides the point. Obama had this to say about Pearson Jones' expulsion. He said, "This nation was built on peaceful protest." An absolute lie. This nation was not built on peaceful protest. The founders were not at all peaceful when they told King George to get off their property and get out of their country. When they broke the yoke of royal oppression upon the soul of this nation in its formative days, that was not peaceful. No elected official should lose their job simply for raising their voice, especially when they're doing it on behalf of our children. So you see here, Obama is evoking a consequentialist ethic. It doesn't matter what is morally correct or wrong if it benefits a certain group of people in a certain group of time. That's the kind of corrupt thinking beneath this statement. He goes on to say, what happened in Tennessee is the latest example of a broader erosion of civility and democratic norms. Silencing those who disagree with us is a sign of weakness, not strength, and it won't lead to progress. Kamala Harris, who immediately went to see Pearson, Jones, and Johnson after the expulsion votes happened, said the following: 6 people, including 3 children, were killed in a school shooting in Nashville. How did Republican lawmakers in Tennessee respond? By expelling their colleagues who stood with Tennesseans and said, enough is enough. This is undemocratic and dangerous. The list goes on. Hillary Clinton responded by also condemning this on the grounds of free speech, invoking more consequentialist language like Barack Obama. Al Gore, of all people, responded, saying that today's GOP-led vote in the Tennessee House disenfranchised nearly 150,000 voters whose representatives rightfully pushed to reform Tennessee's insanely dangerous gun laws after the horrific mass murder at the Covenant School last week. Now, you had Michael Steele, old guard Republican, Bush-era Republican, who also came out and condemned these votes. You had Sheryl Crow, the famous Nashvilleian country singer, who came out and condemned the vote. You had a lot of different people. Tyler Perry, someone who many African Americans like me grew up with, came out and said that these guys were God's gift to us, to this country. Just a lot of different positive praise of these gentlemen that emerged virtually out of nowhere because of what they did. Now, the first thing is first. First thing is first, before we get any further. First thing is first. As many of you have seen, all of these responses, or almost all of them, are phrased upon a false idea of what actually happened. These gentlemen were not silenced for speaking out. They were not silenced for using their free speech. These gentlemen were silenced because, as in the video I'm about to show you, they, as sitting members of the Tennessee House of Representatives, went into the chamber during the proceedings and spoke out of turn. Not only did they speak out of turn, they both used a bullhorn, which is against House procedure, and led a rally, which was in the gallery of the chamber, to shout and further disrupt House proceedings. Take a look at this. Not only that, but Jones and Pearson actually admit They broke the rules, and they understood the consequences of what breaking the rules is. New York Post, Pearson said this: "Yes, I can tell you that we broke house decorum rules, going to the well when you're not called on, and I understand that." He goes on to say, "But it's not so severe that it needs to have the expulsion of myself, Representative Johnson, and Representative Jones. That's an egregious use of power to silence us and abridge our First Amendment rights." You can't have it both ways. You cannot at once say that, yes, we broke the rules and our conduct is not becoming of a sitting representative, and then on the other hand try to evoke the First Amendment. The First Amendment has nothing to do with this, because the First Amendment is a restraint on government acting towards people in general society, not a restraint on government from regulating itself. Government has the ability to regulate itself, and this is what these chambers do by maintaining decorum. In a society without decorum, you don't have a society, because decorum is this basic sense of respect amongst members within society that puts restraint on their behaviors in a more formalized sense. We get this from our understanding of moral foundations, that morality is fundamentally an interpersonal behavior that has to be observed in order for social relations to go well, and in order to have any kind of cooperation, any kind of level. Decorum is the more formalized version of that, typically applied to institutions. Robert's Rules of Order, for example. And it's incredibly important. Just like a car has brakes, that an institution has decorum in order to ensure it's smooth operating. It's a fundamentally and categorically distinct thing from the First Amendment. Now, beyond that though, the way Pearson has been phrasing his struggle, his so-called struggle in this sense, is oddly reminiscent of 1960s civil rights leader Martin Luther King. Here is a speech that he was making right as the third vote was being had to expel Johnson, I believe, for her participation in the Bullhorn protest. Go.
Yes, I tell you, it was a sad day on Saturday. All hope seemed to be lost. Representatives were thrown out of the State House. Democracy seemed to be at its end. Seemed like the NRA and gun lobbyists might win. But oh, that was good news for us. I don't know how long this Saturday in the state of Tennessee might last. But oh, we have good news, folks. We've got good news that Sunday always comes. Resurrection is a promise, and it is a prophecy. It's a prophecy that came out of the cotton fields. It's a prophecy that came out of the lynching tree. It's a prophecy that still lives in each and every one of us in order to make the state of Tennessee the place that it ought to be. And so I've still got hope, because I know we are still here and we will never quit.
Okay, that's over the top. Now, here is the other speech that he's done a few days after that, where he uses Christianity and the example of Christ in a sacrilegious way so as to bind it to his narrow political agenda. He essentially is bending the example of Christ's crucifixion and resurrection to fit his narrow political agenda. Watch this.
Let me tell you about a persecuted people I know who still believe in a prophecy of a Jesus who tells us that even amidst persecution, amidst persecution when they try and break you down into nothing, even amidst persecution when they tell you that you're nobody and that you don't have a name, even amidst persecution when they tell you there'll be nobody on your side, even amidst persecution, there is still a prophecy to believe. Because indeed they lynched him on a Friday. Indeed, they thought they'd had all of it lost and all of the injustices gained on a Friday. They thought that it was all over on Silent Saturday. They said, finally, we don't have to hear anything else about gun violence. Finally, we don't have to hear anything else about poor people. Finally, we don't have to hear anything else about sick people. They were happy on Saturday. But oh, God had a different plan to fulfill a prophecy to each and every one of us 2023 or so years later. That resurrection is always coming. Resurrection is a promise. Resurrection is a guarantee that no matter how dark the days are on that Friday, how sad those days are on Saturday, there's a promise that Sunday is always coming. Resurrection is always is on the way. Resurrection is always promised. Let them beat, let them lynch, let them expel, let them kick out, let them do what they must.
So there's a reason why these gentlemen have been lifted up on this pedestal by the Obamas, by the Clintons, by the Gores, by the establishmentarian of the left. It's because they are doing what most political operatives have excelled in doing, and they have managed to deteriorate our standards of assessing public leaders in our society, and that is they are selling aesthetics for substance. Pearson sounds very powerful because he's channeling up that spirit of Martin Luther King or whatever. I can't even do it because it's so inauthentic and fake. And he sounds quite appealing because that old gospel MLK type way of speaking is very much a way to incite passion, to incite emotion, to incite pathos. But beneath that veneer is absolutely nothing original, it's absolutely nothing substantive, and it's absolutely nothing profound. It is just mere platitudes dressed up nicely. The problem in our society today is that we oftentimes mistake aesthetics, something sounding good, with ethics, the content of something being good. And this mere error has been the cause of so much moral confusion in our society. This mere error has been the cause of so many tyrants rising to power because they can appeal to our sense of taste, our sense of art built into our human understanding, whereas they reject and avoid the rational element of the human soul, which is fundamental to understanding what is proper, what is true, what is right. And Pearson and Jones and all of them are tapping into that aesthetic, tapping into that pathos that all of us unfortunately have within ourselves and all of us are susceptible to. You have to understand that this is primarily an emotional assault on the senses meant to produce a certain outcome. We'll get to that in a second. Now, going on from that, Jones and Pearson are actually professional agitators. As an article for Politico, which did a profile on them, mentioned, Justin Jones, prior to being elected, he was known for his activist work, and he actually led sit-ins and protests for the removal of a bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest in the Tennessee state capitol, and he also organized a 62-day sit-in in the protest for racial justice outside the state capitol after George Floyd was murdered. Pearson has been known to wear African garb at the state capitol to send a message that, about black culture or whatever he calls it. Both these gentlemen are professional agitators who know how to provoke and know how to get a rise out of people, and they are using the appearance of injustice. They're using the appearance of something being wrong to evoke what they want in the world. This is essentially a form of wizardry. This is a form of high manipulation that goes beyond mere manipulation, and that's what's happening here. And the media is complicit. The Obamas are complicit. Everyone who is praising this are complicit in some way, shape, or form. Not only that, but they are also using what I call proximity ethics to drive home their point. Now, what is proximity ethics, Christian? Well, I'll be very simple. Proximity ethics is the behavior, the act of assigning something as good or bad on the basis as to what it is close to. Pearson and Jones are apparently close to the gun violence issue and are close to the solution towards it, and they are also close to this legacy image of the fighting civil rights leader in the 60s going against injustice. And so because they're close to these pretty important or significant things, we're going to judge them as good without actually looking at the substance of their arguments. And similarly, since the Tennessee House Speaker, or the people who voted to expel Pearson, Johnson, and Jones, are close to what people see as a suppression of speech, we're going to judge them as bad. It's not about you actually being for or against something. It's about what you are close to. Proximity ethics can actually be summed up in one line. Can you be in the presence of evil or the presence of good and not actually become evil or good yourself? The proximity ethic says no. If you are in the presence of evil, you are evil. It's a crude form of guilt by association, which is being used here. It's why Pearson is speaking like MLK. It's why Pearson is evoking the image of Christ as a martyr with his own struggles, his own so-called struggles, getting expelled for breaking rules that he very well knew that they were important rules. Because it's all about utilizing aesthetics and making it into an ethical statement, which, as I mentioned, is not proper and is dangerous because it provides significant moral confusion. Now, what is the real story behind all of this nonsense? Behind the expulsion, behind the so-called epidemic of gun violence? What is the real story? The real story, my friends, is very simple and it's actually very scary. Jones, Pearson, and Johnson represent what I would call, and what many have called, the Hegelian dialectic in full motion. Many of you have probably heard thinkers like James Lindsay talk about this, but I'll be very brief about it. The dialectic is summarized as thesis, synthesis, and antithesis. Well, I get that backward a little bit, but that's basically what it is. Thesis, synthesis, antithesis. It's not in that order, but that's basically what it is. It's oftentimes been described in more common terms as problem, reaction, solution. So I'm going to interpret this in the way that I see this play out here. Under this theory, you first create a problem. Now, the problem has actually already been created in this instance. The problem is the so-called rise of gun violence, the so-called epidemic of mass shootings, is what they particularly will say, in the country, which will then require a reaction. Now, I say it's a so-called epidemic because as many people have pointed out, and as is blatantly evident, there is no one definition for what constitutes a mass shooting. Different organizations and different people have different ideas of what a mass shooting is. In some cases, mass shootings are only shootings that took place where over 3 people or 4 people died, and in some cases it's less than that, and there's just a lot of conflicting standards. So how in the world can you actually consistently use that standard when it's confused and there's no set definition? You can only use it in order to manipulate the truth and bend facts to your will, and that's really what the idea of mass shootings has been doing in our current culture. But so the problem is the so-called epidemic of mass shootings, which they cannot even define. The reaction is the protest at the state capitol in Tennessee. It's the making it so hard for legislators to walk through, screaming in their ears. It's the David Hall going on and saying it's the guns, gotta ban the guns. And it's Justin Jones, Justin Pearson, and Gloria Johnson going on the floor of the state capitol, screaming with the bullhorn, exciting protesters in the gallery, and then claiming martyrdom the moment they are punished for breaking rules that they knew they broke. That's the reaction. And what is the solution? Well, the solution is we have to anoint these people as sort of canonized saints of our effort here to ban guns. We have to continue pushing further and harder to ban guns, and we have to keep pressing the issue. Problem, reaction, solution. This is essentially what this is. This entire event is essentially a form of this dialectic, a very crude form, a very basic form, but a form nonetheless, because now the solution it's been seen. These gentlemen become martyrs, these gentlemen become saints, these gentlemen become heroes, and what happens? Well, what happens is, no matter how far they progress in politics, this will be like a halo at the back of their head. This event, them getting expelled, will be like a hill in the back of their head that will solidify and verify their narratives of themselves. It's one thing to say that you're persecuted and that you're held down by a system that is against your ideas. It's another thing to actually have something approaching that, but not exactly that happen, that you can spin for your own purposes. Problem, reaction, solution. The biggest tragedy here is that so many people are tricked by smooth talkers, by rhetoricians who can manipulate words and concepts to their own ends. In the ancient Greek period, we call these sophists, by people who are near the idea of benevolence, who are close to the idea of benevolence, but unlike an emissary who actually carries these ideas to their final conclusion, they're like a parasite, like a vampire that leeches off of these ideas for their own purposes and retains the appearance of them without any of the substance. It is a shame that this sham, that is the Tennessee Three, that is called the Tennessee Three, was not so evident and was not so apparent to so many people around the country who have now bowed down to the altar of Justin Jones, Jones and Pearson, and Gloria Johnson. It's an absolute tragedy. Our founders understood something, that politics is about, primarily, it's about the transcendent. It's about the transcendent, meaning that it's not merely about individual persons in society. It's about the governing principles that ultimately govern what it means to have a society. It's about virtue. It's about all kinds of things. It's about the process of ensuring that this mechanism that's supposed to ensure society is repelled, is protected from forces that would seek to destroy it. It's about ensuring that works well. But it's become about so much more. It's become about so much more. It's become about these people who we engage in a cult of hero worship for. It's become about these ideas, which we don't actually see as ideas, we see them as reflections of individuals and their rhetorical wit. And fundamental moral concepts, like the idea of free speech and the First Amendment, well, they're used to score political points on Twitter and to win, verbal sparring. But they're not actually adhered to and treated with the significance they deserve, as the Obamas and the Clintons and everyone else has shown. One last word, my friends. We have to be very careful, and we have to watch out for Justin Jones, Jones and Pearson. Both of these gentlemen. Gloria Johnson doesn't have, for the ideologues trying to use this situation for their solution, like I mentioned before in the dialectic, she doesn't have the right skin color for that. She's just there. She's in proximity. She's an ally. But for Jones and Pearson, you have to watch out, because both of those gentlemen have a certain kind of charisma to them. Even if Pearson's way of speaking is comical and it's absolutely ridiculous, it has a certain level of allure that will pull people from their rationality into the depths of our emotion. Remember, all of us have pathos. Every single one of us has pathos. Every single one of us has that emotional side to us. And many people throughout history that have been successful politically have been able to effectively levy that, not for you, but against you, so that you can come under their spell as they speak, under their spell as they direct you to where they want you to go. I would urge all of you to tap into your reason, to analyze things for how they are. Try to not be so drawn in by the aesthetics. Try to not be so drawn in by what it looks like, and endeavor to see what it is. And to see what it is, you have to know what it is. To know what it is, you have to use reason. And to use reason effectively, you have to know philosophy. And to do all of that, you have to stay pensive. So my friends, like this video, comment on this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel. Help me in my mission to ensure that bad actors like this are pushed back against by the light of truth and reason. I love you guys so much. And please, stay pensive. Adios.